In the misty orchards of Somerset, 1932, the cider house stood like a sentinel amid golden apples heavy with autumn's promise. Elias Hawthorne, master cider maker, lay sprawled in the pressing room, his blood mingling with the crimson spill of crushed fruit. A single ornate dagger protruded from his chest, glinting under the dim lantern light. No scream had pierced the night. Only the creak of ancient machinery echoed. Who among the shadows, his embittered wife, the jealous rival, or the secretive servant had struck? As fog rolled in, a Belgian detective with impeccable moustaches arrived, his little grey cells already stirring. The game was afoot. Chapter 1. The arrival at Applewood Manor. The train from London to Taunton rattled through the English countryside, its rhythmic clatter a counterpoint to the sombre thoughts of Hercule Poirot. The Belgian detective sat primly in the first-class carriage, his patent leather shoes gleaming, his meticulously waxed moustaches curling with precision. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the faithful companion, leafed through a newspaper, though his eyes darted frequently to the rolling hills beyond the window. The year was 1932, and autumn had draped Somerset in a tapestry of amber and crimson, the orchards heavy with apples ripe for the cider press. Yet, beneath this pastoral charm, a dark summons had brought them here. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice soft but carrying the weight of curiosity. "This English countryside, it is deceptive, no? It whispers of peace, but it hides secrets as deep as the roots of these ancient trees." He gestured toward the window, where gnarled apple trees stretched into the mist like skeletal hands. Hastings folded his paper, a frown creasing his brow. "You're awfully poetic today, Poirot. This murder business has you in a mood. What do we know so far?" Poirot's eyes twinkled, though his expression remained grave. "We know, Hastings, that Elias Hawthorne, master cider maker of Applewood Manor, was found dead in his cider house. Stabbed, they say, with a dagger most ornate. The door was locked from the inside, and no one heard a cry. Inspector Japp believes it is murder, and I, Hercule Poirot, am inclined to agree. The little grey cells, they are already stirred."
A faint smile. "Inspector, you know well that the impossible only sharpens the appetite of Hercule Poirot. A locked room, you say? Most intriguing. Take us to the scene, if you please." The drive to Applewood Manor wound through lanes bordered by hedgerows and orchards, the air thick with the sweet, fermenting scent of fallen apples. The manor itself was a Tudor relic, its black and white beams sagging under the weight of centuries, its leaded windows glinting dully in the overcast light. Apple trees heavy with fruit encircled the estate, their branches casting long shadows that seemed to writhe in the breeze. The cider house, a squat barn of weathered oak, stood apart, its doors barred by police tape. Inside the manor's drawing room, they were greeted by Lydia Hawthorne, the widow of the deceased. She was a woman of 40, her auburn hair pinned tightly, her mourning dress impeccable, yet unable to mask the tremor in her hands. Her eyes, red-rimmed from tears or sleeplessness, met Poirot's with a mixture of defiance and despair. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low and cultured, "I trust you will find who did this to my husband. Elias was difficult, a tyrant in his way, but he did not deserve such an end." Poirot bowed slightly, his gaze never leaving her face. "Madame, my condolences. Tell me, who might have wished harm upon Monsieur Hawthorne? A man of his stature, he must have had enemies, no?" Lydia hesitated, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. "Elias was a driven man. His cider was renowned, his methods ruthless. He outbid rivals like Reginald Thorne, who owns the neighbouring orchard. They quarrelled often. And then there were tensions here. Our maid, Mabel Croft, well, Elias was harsh with the staff. And Dr. Blackwood, the village physician, they argued over debts recently." Hastings scribbled notes, his pencil scratching audibly. "Anyone else, Mrs. Hawthorne?"
Workers, perhaps? Lydia's lips tightened. Victor Lang, one of our labourers. Elias threatened to sack him for stealing apples. The room where Elias Hawthorne had met his end was cordoned off, though the body had been removed to the morgue. Japp gestured to the chalk outline on the wooden floor, where bloodstains spread like a grotesque flower. Here's where we found him. Dagger straight through the heart. Door locked, key inside, windows bolted. No way in or out, unless you believe in ghosts. Poirot knelt, his gloved hands hovering over the bloodstains without touching. The dagger, Inspector. Where is it? Safe at the station, under lock and key. It's a beauty. Silver, engraved with a crest. Thorn-entwined apple. Points to Reginald Thorne, if you ask me. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Too obvious, perhaps. And the lock? Solid as a rock, Japp said. No scratches, no signs of picking. Key was on the floor beside Hawthorne. Hastings peered at the massive cider press, its wooden screw still glistening with crushed apple pulp. Could someone have hidden in here, behind the machinery? Poirot shook his head. No, mon ami, the space is too confined. But observe this residue in the vat. Cider, yes, but mixed with something. Acrid. We must have it analyzed. As they exited, Poirot paused, his gaze sweeping the orchard. The scream lingered in his memory, a thread in the tapestry of this mystery. Back in the manor, interviews began. Reginald Thorne, a burly man with a florid face, sat stiffly in the library, his hands clenched. Hawthorne was a cheat, he growled. Undercut my prices, stole my buyers, ruined me. But I was at home that night. My wife will swear to it. Mabel Croft, the maid, was next, her youthful face pale beneath her cap. Master was cruel, she whispered, glancing nervously at the door. I heard him arguing with Dr. Blackwood the night before. Something about money owed. Dr. Silas Blackwood, a wiry man with sharp eyes behind spectacles, adjusted his tie. Elias consulted me for a heart condition. Owed me for months of treatment. But murder? Preposterous. I certified his death, stab wound clear as day. No quest. Tomorrow, we unravel more threads. The fire crackled in the grate, its warmth doing little to dispel the chill of suspicion that hung over Applewood Manor. Lydia offered tea, her hands steady now, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Mabel hovered, her gaze darting between guests. Victor Lang, summoned from the workers' quarters, stood awkwardly in his rough jacket, his alibi of the village pub unshaken, but his demeanour uneasy. Poirot sipped his tea, his mind a whirl of clues. The locked room, the ornate dagger, the acrid residue, the scream, the glove. Each was a piece of a puzzle, but the picture remained obscured. Madame, he said to Lydia, your husband, he had a secret, perhaps? A recipe, a debt, a betrayal? Her cup rattled in its saucer. He was obsessed with his cider. A new blend, he said, would make us rich. He guarded it fiercely. And who knew of this? Only me, and perhaps Mabel. She overheard things. The maid blushed, retreating to the shadows. Poirot's eyes followed her, noting the tremble in her hands. Outside, the wind moaned through the orchards, carrying the faint scent of cider and secrets. The first day at Applewood Manor had ended, but the mystery was only beginning. Chapter 2. The scene of the crime. The cider house stood apart from Applewood Manor, a weathered oak barn that seemed to crouch in the shadow of the orchards, its silhouette stark against the leaden sky of Somerset in October 1932. Hercule Poirot, his coat buttoned tightly against the damp chill, led the way, his patent leather shoes navigating the muddy path with fastidious care. Captain Arthur Hastings followed, his valise swinging, while Inspector Japp, ever practical, strode ahead, his boots squelching without concern. The air was heavy with the cloying sweetness of fermenting apples,
undercut by a faint metallic tang that hinted at the violence within. "Mon ami," Poirot said, pausing at the cider house door. "Observe the scene. This is no mere barn. It is a stage where tragedy has played its act." His green eyes, sharp as cut glass, scanned the structure, noting the heavy padlock, now broken open by the police, and the dark, rust red where his blood had pooled, mingling grotesquely with spilled cider. The ornate dagger, now removed to police custody, had left an impression in Poirot's mind. Silver, intricately engraved with a crest of a thorn-entwined apple. Hastings, peering at the chalk outline, rubbed his chin. "A locked room, Poirot. How the deuce did the killer get out? No windows big enough for a man to climb through, and the door was bolted from within." Poirot knelt beside the outline, his gloved fingers hovering over the bloodstains without touching. "Précisément, Hastings, the locked room. It is a puzzle that delights the little grey cells. But let us consider the facts." He rose, moving to the door, its lock heavy and unyielding. "No signs of tampering. The key, you say, was inside?" Japp nodded, producing a small evidence bag. "Here it is. Found right by the body. Solid brass, fits the lock perfectly. No scratches, no forced entry." Poirot's gaze shifted to the cider press, its wooden trough still slick with pulp. He leaned closer, sniffing delicately. "This residue, it is not merely cider. There is something acrid, no? Perhaps chemical. Inspector, this must be analyzed at once." Japp scratched his head. "Poison, you think? But the dagger?" "Oui. The dagger is dramatic, but the little grey cells suspect a deeper game." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he paced the room, his cane tapping rhythmically. "The method, it speaks to the motive. A dagger suggests passion, a sudden act. But poison? That is cold, calculated." Hastings, ever the practical soldier, examined the press. "Could someone have hidden here? Behind the machinery, perhaps?" "Non, mon ami." Poirot gestured to the cramped space. "The press is too close to the walls. No room for a man to conceal himself. But observe, the floor. Footprints in the dust, faint but present. Small, perhaps a woman's, or a man with dainty feet." Japp raised an eyebrow. "You're seeing things I don't, Poirot. But I'll have the lads sweep for prints."
Library. A room heavy with the scent of old leather and dust. Bookshelves groaned with tomes on horticulture and cider making, a testament to Elias Hawthorne's obsession. Reginald Thorne was first, his florid face flushed with indignation as he sat, his hands clenched on the arms of the chair. "Hawthorne was a snake," Thorne spat. "Undercut my prices, stole my contracts. His cider won awards while mine rotted in barrels. I hated the man, I won't lie. But murder? I was at home with my wife, playing bridge with the vicar. Ask them." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Monsieur Thorne, this dagger, its crest matches your family's, no?" Thorne paled. "It's an old design. Anyone could have got hold of it. Hawthorne himself had one in his collection." Next came Mabel Croft, the maid, her youthful face pale beneath her starched cap. She twisted her apron nervously, her eyes darting to the door. "Master Hawthorne was cruel," she whispered, "always shouting, threatening to sack us. I heard him arguing with Dr. Blackwood the night before he died. Over money, I think. Something about unpaid bills." Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but probing. "And you, Mademoiselle Croft, where were you when the master was killed?" "Cleaning the silver in the pantry," she said quickly. "I saw nothing, heard nothing, till the scream in the morning when Victor found him. Dr. Silas Blackwood was last, a wiry man with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He adjusted his tie, his manner cool but guarded. "Elias consulted me for a heart condition," he said, "owed me a pretty penny for treatments, but I was miles away that night, tending a patient with influenza. As for his death, I certified it. Stab wound, clear as day. No question of natural causes." Poirot steepled his fingers. "And this argument with Monsieur Hawthorne?" Blackwood shrugged. "He was slow to pay, that's all. Nothing worth killing over." As the interviews concluded, twilight settled over Applewood Manor, the sky bruising purple. Poirot paced the drawing-room, his mind a whirl of clues. The locked room,
Poirot mused.
but the little grey cells suggest more. The scream, the glove, the residue, they point to a mind that plans, that deceives. Japp returned from another sweep of the grounds, his face grim. "Found something else, Poirot. A handkerchief, blood-stained, tucked behind a barrel in the cider house. Initials S.B., Silas Blackwood." Poirot examined the cloth, his lips pursing. Another clue too neatly placed. The killer plays a game, but Hercule Poirot is a master of such games. As night fell, the manor grew quiet, save for the creak of old timbers and the distant howl of the wind through the orchards. Poirot stood at the window, watching shadows shift among the trees. "Someone watches Hastings," he murmured. "Someone who fears the truth." A sudden noise, a soft thump from the hall, made Hastings jump. What was that? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Perhaps another clue, or perhaps a warning. The night, it holds its secrets, but not for long. The fire in the grate crackled, casting flickering light on the walls, where portraits of past Hawthorns gazed down with stern disapproval. Lydia retired, her footsteps echoing on the stairs. Mabel lingered, clearing the tea tray, her eyes avoiding Poirot's. Victor Lang, summoned briefly, reiterated his alibi, his rough hands fidgeting. The air was thick with suspicion, each glance a potential accusation. Poirot sat, his notebook open, sketching a diagram of the cider house. The lock, the key, the dagger, the residue, he muttered. They form a pattern, but it is incomplete. We must dig deeper, Hastings. As they prepared to retire, a note slipped under Poirot's door. Its handwriting hurried. "Beware the shadows." Hastings read it aloud, his voice tense. "Good Lord, Poirot, what does it mean?" "It means, mon ami, that the killer knows we are close, and that is their first mistake." The wind moaned outside, carrying the scent of apples and secrets. The second day at Applewood Manor dawned with the promise of revelation, but the shadows of the cider house held their truths tightly, for now.
Night. It wasn't natural. And now we're traipsing through these orchards in the dark. Are you sure this is wise? Poirot's eyes gleamed under the brim of his Homburg hat. Mon ami, the night. It speaks when the day is silent. The orchards of Applewood, they hold secrets. That scream, it was no fox, as Inspector Japp suggests. It was a cry of fear, or perhaps of guilt. He paused, his gaze sweeping the twisted branches. "Observe, Hastings. The ground, it tells a story." He knelt, his gloved hand hovering over a patch of trampled grass near a gnarled tree. Footprints, small, perhaps a woman's, or a man with delicate feet. Fresh, from last night, I wager. They lead toward the cider house. He pointed to a faint trail, barely discernible in the moonlight, where the grass was crushed and the mud disturbed. Hastings squinted, his military instincts kicking in. Could be the killer returning to cover their tracks, or someone spying on us. Précisément, Poirot murmured, rising. But why return? To retrieve something, perhaps, or to plant another false clue. His mind churned, the little gray cells aligning the pieces, the locked cider house, the ornate dagger,
the acrid residue in the vat. The dry mudded glove marked RT, a red herring, he was certain. And now, these footprints. The puzzle grew more intricate with each step. They pressed deeper into the orchard, the trees closing in, their branches clawing at the sky. The cider house loomed ahead, its dark bulk a silent witness to Elias Hawthorne's murder. Poirot paused, sniffing the air. The scent of apples, it is intoxicating. But there is something else, a trace of fear, perhaps. As they neared the cider house, a rustle in the undergrowth made Hastings whirl, his hand instinctively reaching for a revolver he no longer carried. "Who's there?" he called, his voice sharp. Silence answered, save for the wind's low moan. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Patience, Hastings. The shadows, they watch, but they will reveal themselves in time." Back at the...
He kept his notes locked in his study, shared them with no one, not even me, fully. "And who else knew of this recipe?" Poirot asked, his tone gentle but probing. "Mabel, perhaps. She cleaned his study. And Victor Lang, our worker. He helped with the presses. Elias trusted no one. But they might have overheard." Her voice faltered. "He said it was dangerous, that others would kill for it." Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, looked up. "Dangerous? Did he name anyone? This Reginald Thorne, perhaps?" Lydia shook her head. "He never said directly, but he and Reginald were bitter rivals. Thorne's orchard was failing, while Elias's thrived. And Dr. Blackwood, Elias argued with him over money, but also something about poisoned apples." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Poisoned apples? Most curious. Elaborate, s'il vous plaît." "He didn't explain," Lydia said, twisting her handkerchief. "Just that the doctor warned him about contamination in the orchards. Elias dismissed it, said Blackwood was meddling." Before Poirot could press further, Victor Lang appeared in the doorway, summoned by Jap. The worker was a burly man, his face weathered from years in the fields, his rough jacket stained with apple juice. His eyes darted nervously, and his hands fidgeted as he stood. "You wanted me, sir?" he asked Jap, his voice gruff. "Oui, Monsieur Lang," Poirot said, rising. "Your alibi. You were at the village pub the night of the murder, no? Can anyone confirm this?" "The barkeep, Tom," Lang said quickly. "Half the village saw me there till midnight. I didn't kill the master, I swear. He was a hard man, but I needed the work." "And this argument with Dr. Blackwood?" Poirot asked, his voice like velvet over steel. "Madame Hawthorne speaks of poisoned apples." Lang shifted uncomfortably. "Aye, I heard him. Doc said something about bad apples in the West Orchard, maybe tainted. Master laughed it off, called it nonsense. But they was shouting all right." Jap, leaning against the fireplace, interjected. "We've got more on Reginald Thorne. That glove we found, RT, it's his, no question. I've sent for Applewood that night." Jap crossed his arms. "We'll check. But that crest on the dagger, your family's. Hard to argue with that." Thorne's jaw tightened. "Hawthorne had one too in his collection. Anyone could have taken it." Poirot waved a hand, silencing the room. "Enough! The dagger, the glove, they are threads, but not the weave. We must look deeper." He turned to Lydia. "Madame, this notebook of your husband's, where is it now?" "In his study," she said. "Locked in his desk. I haven't touched it since it happened." "Then we shall examine it tomorrow," Poirot declared. "For now, we retire. But the shadows, they move, and Hercule Poirot watches." As the suspects dispersed, the manor settled into an uneasy quiet, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the distant howl of the wind. Hastings, pacing, turned to Poirot. "This is a tangle, old chap. The scream, the footprints, the glove. Where do we start?" Poirot smiled, his eyes distant. "We start, mon ami, with the why. Why a dagger when poison was possible? Why a locked room when an open one would suffice? The killer they wished to confuse, to dazzle, but the little gray cells, they see through the fog. They retired to their rooms, but sleep was elusive. The manor creaked, its timbers groaning under the weight of secrets. Outside, the orchards stood sentinel, their shadows shifting in the moonlight. Poirot stood at his window, his mind tracing the footprints in the grass, the acrid residue, the scream. Each was a clue, but the pattern remained elusive. As he turned down the lamp, a soft rustle came from the hall, a whisper of movement, too deliberate for the wind. Hastings in the next room stirred. "Poirot, did you hear that?" "Oui," Poirot replied softly. "The shadows, they speak again. Tomorrow we listen." The night closed in, the orchard silent but for the soft thud of falling apples, each one a reminder of the blood spilled in the cider house. The mystery of Elias Hawthorne's death deepened, its threads weaving a tapestry.
"Messieurs," Poirot began, his voice precise as a metronome, addressing the assembled suspects. "We are gathered to examine the alibis, to sift truth from deception. The death of Monsieur Hawthorne, it is no simple affair. A locked room, a dagger, a scream in the night, these are pieces of a puzzle, and Hercule Poirot will fit them together." His green eyes, sharp and unyielding, swept the room, noting every twitch, every glance. Lydia Hawthorne sat rigidly in a high-backed chair, her morning dress absorbing the firelight. Her auburn hair was pinned tightly, but her hands betrayed her, twisting a lace handkerchief. Reginald Thorne, the rival cider maker, glowered from a corner, his florid face still flushed from his brief arrest over the monogrammed glove, a clue Poirot had declared a red herring. Mabel Croft, the maid, hovered near the door, her youthful face pale beneath her cap, her apron clutched nervously. Dr. Silas Blackwood, the village physician, adjusted his spectacles, his sharp eyes wary. Victor Lang, the burly orchard worker, stood awkwardly, his rough jacket out of place among the manor's elegance. "Let us begin," Poirot said, his cane resting lightly in his hands. "Madame Hawthorne, where were you the night of the murder?" Lydia's voice was steady, though her eyes flickered. "In my room, alone. Elias and we had separate chambers. I retired early, after supper. I heard nothing until Mabel's scream the next morning." Poirot nodded, his gaze piercing. "And you, Mademoiselle Croft?" Mabel's hands trembled as she smoothed her apron. "I was in the pantry, sir, polishing the silver. It's my nightly task. I didn't hear nothing, not till I found the master in the cider house at dawn." Her voice cracked, and she glanced at the floor. Hastings scribbled, whispering to Poirot, "She's nervous, but that's to be expected, isn't it?" "Perhaps," Poirot murmured, his eyes never leaving Mabel. "And you, Monsieur Thorne?" Thorne crossed his arms, his voice gruff. "I told you, I was at home, playing bridge with my wife and the vicar, miles away from apple contamination in his west orchard. Pesticides, perhaps." He laughed it off, called me a meddler. Finally, Poirot faced Victor Lang, whose broad shoulders seemed to shrink under scrutiny. "Monsieur Lang, your alibi, the village pub, it holds?" "Aye," Lang said, his voice rough but firm. "Tom, the barkeep, saw me till midnight. Half the village did. I didn't kill the master, though he was a hard man. Threatened to sack me over a few pinched apples." Poirot steepled his fingers, his mind whirring. "The alibis, they are plausible, yet the little grey cells, they are not satisfied. Let us consider the evidence." He rose, pacing slowly. The glove, marked RT, was a distraction. The mud was dry, while the orchard was wet. A red herring, planted to mislead. But there is more. The residue in the cider vat. Inspector, what says the analysis? Jap produced a folded paper. Just got the report. Traces of arsenic in the vat, mixed with the cider. Not enough to kill outright, but enough to make a man sick over time. Gasps rippled through the room. Lydia's handkerchief fell to the floor. Mabel's eyes widened, and Blackwood's spectacles slipped down his nose. Thorne muttered a curse, while Lang shifted uneasily. "Arsenic!" Hastings exclaimed. "So Hawthorne was poisoned before the dagger?" "Précisément," Poirot said, his voice low but commanding. "The dagger, it was a flourish, a mask to hide the true method. The poison, it was administered slowly, over weeks perhaps. The stab wound ensured death, but also confusion." Blackwood blustered. "Absurd! I'm a doctor, not a poisoner. Arsenic's common enough, used for rats, not murder." "Indeed," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. "And who had access to such a substance?" Mabel's face drained of colour. "The master. He ordered arsenic for the rats in the cider house, kept it in the shed. I fetched it for him sometimes." Jap's eyes gleamed. "Did you now? And where's that arsenic now, lass?"
Reaction. The arsenic, it confirms the poison in the vat, but the dagger, the locked room, they suggest a mind that plans, that deceives. We must look beyond the obvious. Hastings leaned closer. "You think the vial's another red herring, like the glove?" "Perhaps," Poirot said. "Or perhaps it is a truth wrapped in a lie. We must examine the notebook in Monsieur Hawthorne's study. It may hold the key." The group moved to the study, a small room cluttered with papers and bottles of experimental cider. The desk, heavy oak, bore a locked drawer. Lydia produced a key, her hands trembling as she opened it. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with Elias's cramped handwriting, recipes, ratios, and cryptic notes about a golden blend. Poirot leafed through it, his eyes scanning swiftly. This recipe, it was his treasure, but there is more. References to debts, to secrets. He wrote of a betrayal in the orchard. Most curious. Thunder rumbled outside, the rain intensifying. The suspects exchanged uneasy glances, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Mabel hovered near the door, her eyes red from crying. Blackwood adjusted his spectacles, his composure fraying. Thorne muttered about ruined reputations, while Lang's fists clenched, his gaze darting to Lydia. Jap, holding the vial, turned to Poirot. "What now? We've got the poison, the dagger, the glove. It's pointing every which way." Poirot smiled faintly. "The little grey cells, they work, Inspector. The clues, they are threads, but the weave is incomplete. We must ask, why poison, then stab? Why lock the room? The killer, they wish to dazzle us with complexity." As the group dispersed, Lydia lingered, her voice low. "Monsieur Poirot, Elias was not a good man. He drove people away, me, the workers, even his friends. But I didn't kill him." Poirot studied her, his expression unreadable. "Madame, the truth, it hides in the shadows, but not for long." The manor settled into an uneasy quiet, the storm outside mirroring the tension within. Hastings, pacing by the fire,
Chapter 5. The Poisoned Chalice. The storm that had battered Applewood Manor through the night lingered into the morning of October 1932, its rain a relentless murmur against the ancient Tudor beams. The library, with its heavy shelves of horticultural tomes and the faint scent of wax and leather, was a battleground of suspicion. Hercule Poirot sat at the centre, his impeccable suit a beacon of order amidst the chaos of Elias Hawthorne's murder. His green eyes, sharp as a hawk's,
surveyed the suspects gathered before him. Lydia Hawthorne, her mourning dress a stark contrast to her pale, trembling hands. Reginald Thorne, his florid face still simmering from his brief arrest. Mabel Croft, the maid, her youthful features pinched with fear. Dr. Silas Blackwood, his spectacles glinting with a guarded wariness. And Victor Lang, the orchard worker, whose rough hands fidgeted incessantly. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the fire, his notebook open, while Inspector Japp clutched the arsenic vial, its discovery in Mabel's room a bombshell that had electrified the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice a velvet blade. "The discovery of this vial, it is a thunderclap in our investigation. Arsenic found in the cider vat and now in the possession of Mademoiselle Croft. Yet the little grey cells, they urge caution. Let us unravel this thread with care." He steepled his fingers, his gaze sweeping the room, noting every flinch, every averted eye. Mabel's sob broke the silence, her hands twisting her apron. "It's not mine, sir. I swear it. The master kept arsenic in the shed for rats. I fetched it for him, that's all." Japp's eyes narrowed, his Cockney accent sharp. "Fetched it, eh? And it ends up in your drawer. Convenient, that. You were sweet on Hawthorne, weren't you? Spurned lover, maybe." Mabel's face crumpled, tears streaming. "No, he was cruel, but I wouldn't." Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. "Inspector, patience. Mademoiselle Croft, you say this vial was—"
The glove marked RT is too neat. A clue placed to dazzle us. The true killer, they weave a web of misdirection.
He turned to Blackwood, whose fingers tapped nervously on his knee. "Doctor, arsenic. It is a substance you know well, no? In your medical practice, perhaps?" Blackwood's spectacles flashed as he adjusted them. "Absurd. I prescribe medicines, not poisons. Yes, arsenic is used in small doses for certain treatments, but I've no reason to harm Elias. He owed me money, true, but I was miles away that night, tending a patient." Hastings, scribbling furiously, whispered, "The poison changes everything, Poirot. The dagger was a cover, then?" "Précisément," Poirot murmured. "The arsenic, it was the true weapon, administered slowly to weaken Monsieur Hawthorne. The dagger, it was a theatrical gesture, perhaps to mask the poison, or to point to another, Reginald Thorne, with his crest upon the blade." Thorne bristled, his voice a growl. "I told you that dagger's not mine. Hawthorne had one in his collection. Anyone could have taken it." Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Indeed, the dagger, the glove, the vial, they are threads in a tapestry of deceit. But the notebook, Madame Hawthorne, let us return to it. Your husband's recipe, his golden blend, it was valuable, no?" Lydia's hands stilled, her voice low. "Elias believed it would make us rich. He guarded it fiercely, locked in his study. He said it was his legacy, but also his burden. Others envied it, Reginald, perhaps, or even the workers." Poirot's gaze shifted to the study door, where they had examined the notebook the previous day. "We must delve deeper into these notes. They may reveal not only the recipe, but the secrets that drove a killer to act." The group moved to the study, a cramped room cluttered with bottles of experimental cider and stacks of papers. The oak desk, its locked drawer now open, held the leather-bound notebook, its pages dense with Elias's cryptic scrawl. Poirot leafed
Further, and we must search the shed for more traces of this arsenic.
As the suspects dispersed, Lydia lingered, her voice barely a whisper. "Monsieur Poirot, Elias was a hard man, but he didn't deserve this. If the recipe is the key, I beg you, find it before more harm is done.
Poirot studied her, his expression unreadable.
Madame, the truth, it is like your husband's cider. It ferments slowly, but its flavor is inevitable.
The investigation moved to the shed, a ramshackle structure behind the cider house, its interior cluttered with tools and sacks of grain. The air was damp, tinged with the chemical bite of pesticides. Japp's men searched, uncovering a tin labeled arsenic for vermin, its contents half empty. "Matches the vial," Japp said, holding it up, "but anyone could have got at this." Poirot nodded, his eyes scanning the shelves.
Indeed. The shed, it is a crossroads. Madame Hawthorne, Mademoiselle Croft, Monsieur Lang all passed through. But the little grey cells, they ask, who placed the vial in Mabel's room?
Back in the manor, the tension was palpable. Mabel, still shaken, served tea, her hands trembling so violently that she spilled a drop on the tablecloth. Blackwood retreated to a corner, his face pale. Thorne muttered about ruined reputations, while Lang's eyes darted to the windows, as if expecting another scream from the orchards. Hastings, pacing, turned to Poirot. "This poison business, it's devilishly clever. Slow poisoning, then a dagger to throw us off. But who benefits most?" Poirot's gaze was distant.
The motive, it lies in the notebook, or perhaps in the orchard itself. The betrayal Elias wrote of. It points to someone close, someone trusted.
As they prepared to dine, the atmosphere grew heavier, the storm outside mirroring the storm within. Poirot, ever observant, took a sip of cider offered by Lydia, his eyes never leaving her face. Suddenly, he coughed, clutching his throat, his face contorting in pain. The room froze, glasses clattering as Hastings leapt to his side. "Poirot!" Hastings cried. "Good Lord, are you—"
Traps. Thorne, released but still under suspicion, glared at Japp, while Lydia retreated, her eyes haunted. As the evening drew to a close, Poirot stood by the window, the rain a soft curtain beyond. The little grey cells, they work, Hastings. The poison, the dagger, the locked room, they form a pattern, but it is not yet complete. Tomorrow, we probe deeper, into the notebook, the shed, the hearts of those who dwell here. Hastings, shaken, nodded. "A close call, Poirot. This killer's bold, tampering with your drink." "Bold, yes," Poirot said, his voice soft but resolute. "But boldness betrays. The shadows, they close in, and the truth, it waits." The manor fell silent, save for the relentless rain and the creak of ancient timbers. Outside, the orchards stood sentinel, their secrets buried deep in the mud and moonlight, awaiting the unraveling touch of Hercule Poirot's little grey cells. Chapter 6. A Narrow Escape. The storm had abated by the late morning of October 1932, leaving Applewood Manor cloaked in a damp grey mist that clung to the Tudor beams and seeped through the leaded windows. The air in the drawing room was thick with tension, the fire's crackle a feeble counterpoint to the chill of suspicion that enveloped the suspects. Hercule Poirot, his composure restored after the alarming incident with the tampered cider, sat with his hands folded, his green eyes gleaming like polished jade. The arsenic-laced drink had been a warning, a bold move by a killer desperate to divert the investigation. Captain Arthur Hastings, still shaken, hovered near the fireplace, his notebook clutched tightly, while Inspector Japp, his face grim, paced with the energy of a caged hound. The suspects, Lydia Hawthorne, Reginald Thorne, Mabel Croft, Dr. Silas Blackwood and Victor Lang, sat in uneasy silence, their faces a gallery of fear, defiance, and guilt. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice a calm anchor in the storm of emotions. "The attempt on my person. It is a sign that the killer grows reckless. The cider, laced with arsenic, was not Poured from the bottle in the pantry, Inspector,"
I had no idea it was poisoned. I drank from the same bottle myself." Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Madame, the bottle, it was accessible to all, no? The pantry is no fortress. Anyone could have tampered with it. Mademoiselle Croft, who works there, Monsieur Lang, who repairs the manor, even you, Dr. Blackwood, who visits often."
Blackwood's spectacles flashed as he bristled.
"Preposterous! I'm a physician, not a poisoner. I was nowhere near the pantry yesterday."
Mabel, her voice trembling, interjected,
"I filled the bottle from the cask, sir, but I didn't touch no poison. Someone must have got to it after."
Victor Lang, his broad frame shifting uncomfortably, growled,
"Don't look at me. I was in the orchards all day, fixing the press. Ain't my job to mess with cider in the house."
Thorne, still smarting from his earlier arrest, muttered,
"This is a farce. You're grasping at straws, Jap."
Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room.
"Enough. The cider, it is but one thread in this tapestry. Let us return to the heart of the matter, the death of Monsieur Hawthorne. The arsenic, it weakened him over weeks. The dagger, it ensured his end. But why both? The little grey cells, they suggest a duality, a plan meticulous, yet a passion unleashed."
Hastings frowned, his pencil pausing.
"Two killers, you mean? A partnership?"
"Perhaps," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing.
"Or one mind, playing two roles. We must probe further. The notebook, the shed, the footprints in the orchard, they hold the truth."
The investigation shifted to action. Jap's men had analyzed the cider, confirming traces of arsenic matching the vat and the vial found in Mabel's room. The vial remained a contentious clue, its placement too convenient to be trusted. Poirot, determined to test the alibis, proposed a search of the grounds. As they stepped into the mist-shrouded orchards, a sudden movement caught Hastings' eye. A figure
"For yourself, lad. What else are you hiding?" Poirot's gaze was piercing. "Monsieur Lang, this argument. What did you hear?" Lang swallowed hard. "Mrs. Hawthorne, she said the manor was bankrupt. Begged him to sell the recipe or the orchard itself. Master refused, said it was his legacy. They was yelling. Then I left, went to the pub like I said." Back at the manor, Lydia faced the accusation, her face pale but composed. "Yes, I argued with Elias," she admitted, her voice steady. "He'd driven us to ruin with his obsession. I begged him to sell the recipe, to save us. But I didn't kill him. I retired to my room after." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Madame, your candour, it is noted. But the cider house, it was locked. How did you leave?" "The side door," she said quickly. "It's rarely used, but it was open that night. I left Elias there, alive."
Jap frowned. "Side door? First I'm hearing of it. We'll check it." The group moved to the cider house, where the side door, half hidden by barrels, bore a rusty lock. Jap's men examined it, finding no signs of tampering, but the key was missing.
"Could have been used," Jap muttered. "But the main door was locked from inside, key by the body."
Poirot knelt, inspecting the floor.
Dust undisturbed. This door, it was not used that night. Madame, your story, it falters. Lydia's hands clenched. "I swear, I left him alive." The investigation deepened, the clues mounting. The dagger, Poirot learned, was indeed from the manor's collection, displayed in the hall, a fact any resident could exploit. The arsenic vial, the glove, the tampered cider, all pointed to a killer who thrived on misdirection. But a new clue emerged. A bloody handkerchief found by Japp's men in Blackwood's medical bag during a search of his room. "Explain this, Doctor," Japp demanded, holding up the stained cloth monogrammed SB. Blackwood's face drained of colour. "Planted! I've never seen it before. Someone—" Mystery. Poirot stood by the window, his gaze fixed on the shadowed trees, where the faint thud of falling apples echoed like a heartbeat. "Hastings," he said softly. "The killer. They are close. The cider. It was a warning to me, but also a mistake. They fear what we will find." Hastings, his nerves taut, nodded. "What's next, then? The notebook? The shed?" "Both," Poirot said. "And the orchard. The footprints, the scream, they point to a truth hidden in the shadows. Tomorrow, we confront it." A sudden noise, a soft creak in the hall, made Hastings start. "Another warning?" he whispered. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Or another clue. The night, it speaks, and Hercule Poirot listens." The manor settled into an uneasy silence, the fog outside a veil over the secrets of Applewood. The killer's game was bold, but Poirot's little grey cells were bolder still, weaving the threads of arsenic, blood, and betrayal into a tapestry that would soon reveal its truth. Chapter 7. Unraveling Threads. The fog that cloaked Applewood Manor on that October morning in 1932 seemed to mirror the murkiness of the mystery surrounding Elias Hawthorne's death. The Tudor estate, its black and white beams glistening with dew, stood silent, save for the occasional creak of ancient timbers and the distant thud of apples falling in the orchards. Hercule Poirot, his patent leather shoes polished to a mirror shine, sat in the manor's study, his fingers tracing the edges of Elias's leather-bound notebook. The room was cluttered with bottles of experimental cider and stacks of papers, a testament to the victim's obsession. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the window, his notebook open, while Inspector Japp, his face etched with frustration, leaned against the oak desk. The suspects, Lydia Hawthorne, Reginald Thorne, Mabel Croft, Dr. Silas Blackwood, and Victor Lang, had been summoned again, their faces a gallery of unease under Poirot's piercing gaze. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice a calm beacon in the storm.
He held up Elias's journal, its pages dense with cryptic notes. "Here we find not only recipes, but secrets, debts, betrayals, and a name. Dr. Blackwood." Blackwood's spectacles slipped as he straightened, his voice sharp. "What are you implying, Poirot? I told you. Elias owed me for treatments. He was a difficult patient, nothing more." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The notebook, it suggests more. Monsieur Hawthorne wrote of a physician's indiscretion, a secret he held over you, perhaps? Blackmail?" The room tensed, gasps rippling like a breeze through the orchard. Blackwood's face flushed, his hands clenching. "Preposterous! But yes, Elias knew something. I prescribed medicines for his heart, perhaps not entirely by the book. He threatened to report me unless I waived his debts. But murder? I was miles away that night." Japp's eyes narrowed. "Blackmail's a motive, Doctor, and that handkerchief didn't plant itself." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "Patience, Inspector. The handkerchief, it is another red herring, too neatly placed. Let us turn to another thread. Mademoiselle Croft, you cleaned the study. Did you see this notebook?" Mabel, her face pale beneath her cap, nodded hesitantly. "Aye, sir. Master was always scribbling in it, kept it locked in his desk. I never read it, I swear. but I heard him muttering about Victor stealing apples, threatening to sack him. Lang's fists clenched, his voice rough. I took a few apples, but I didn't kill him. Master was a tyrant, but I needed the work. I was at the pub, like I said. Poirot's gaze shifted to Lydia, whose auburn hair caught the dim light. Madame, your husband's notes mention a betrayal in the orchard. You argued with him that night, no? About the manor's finances? Lydia's hands twisted her handkerchief, her voice low. Yes, I admitted it. Elias had driven us to ruin with his obsession over the recipe. I begged him to sell, to save us. He refused, said it was his legacy. But I left him a
Mud. These prints, they are fresh, from the night of the murder. Small, delicate, perhaps Mademoiselle Croft, or Madame Hawthorne, or a man clever enough to disguise his step. Japp frowned, his boots squelching. We've checked the alibis. Thorne's vicar confirms he was at home. Blackwood's housekeeper says he returned past midnight. Lang's pub story holds for now. Mrs. Hawthorne and the maid, they've no one to vouch for them. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And yet, the side door of the cider house, which Madame claims she used, it was undisturbed. The lock, the key, the dust, they tell a different story. Someone wishes us to believe in exits that were not used. Back in the manor, the suspects were summoned to the drawing room, where the fire cast flickering shadows on the walls. Reginald Thorne, released but still under suspicion, sat stiffly, his indignation palpable. This is harassment, Poirot. That glove was a plant, and you know it. Indeed, Monsieur Thorne, Poirot said, his voice smooth. The glove, it was a distraction. But your rivalry with Monsieur Hawthorne, it was fierce, no? His recipe, it threatened your livelihood. Thorne's jaw tightened. He ruined me, yes, but I didn't need to kill him. My cider's coming back, new buyers, new blends. I was moving on. Poirot turned to Mabel, whose hands trembled as she poured tea. Mademoiselle, the arsenic vial in your room, someone placed it there. Who entered your quarters? Only Mrs. Hawthorne to check linens, Mabel whispered, and Victor to fix a floorboard. But I didn't touch no poison, Lang growled. I fixed the board, but I didn't plant nothing. Someone's setting us all up. Poirot's gaze shifted to Blackwood, who adjusted his spectacles nervously. Doctor, your indiscretion, it gave Monsieur Hawthorne power over you. Enough to drive you to desperation? Blackwood's voice was sharp. I told you I was blackmailed, but I didn't kill him. My alibi's solid. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The notebook had revealed more than recipes. A list of debts, including one to Blackwood, and a cryptic handwriting. This could crack the case. Poirot's smile was faint. The note, it is another thread, but the tapestry, it is nearly complete. The arsenic, it weakened the victim. The dagger, it sealed his fate. The locked room, it was a stage, set to confuse. But the little grey cells, they see the truth forming. As the suspects dispersed, the manor grew quiet, the fog outside thickening to a shroud. Hastings, pacing, turned to Poirot. This is a devil of a case, Poirot. The note, the blackmail, the poison, it's all pointing different ways. Non, mon ami, Poirot said, his voice resolute. It points to one truth, hidden in the shadows. The killer. They are close, and they fear us. The cider, the handkerchief, the note, they are mistakes, and mistakes betray. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a storm brewing anew. As Poirot and Hastings prepared to retire, a figure appeared at the window, a fleeting shadow, gone before Hastings could react. Good Lord, Poirot, did you see that? Oui, Poirot said softly, his eyes fixed on the darkness. The shadows, they move,
And Hercule Poirot, he is ready.
The manor settled into an uneasy silence, the fog a veil over the secrets of the orchard. The killer's game was intricate, but Poirot's little gray cells were weaving the threads, arsenic, blood, and betrayal, into a tapestry that would soon reveal its dark design. Chapter 8. The Gathering Storm. The fog that shrouded Applewood Manor on that fateful October afternoon in 1932 seemed to thicken with the weight of unspoken truths, its tendrils curling around the ancient Tudor beans like fingers of suspicion. The drawing-room, bathed in the flickering glow of a dying fire, was a crucible of tension, its air heavy with the scent of polished wood and the faint tang of fermenting apples drifting from the orchards beyond. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, his impeccable suit a stark contrast to the chaos of Elias Hawthorne's murder.
Confront the shadows. He twirled his mustache, a gesture both theatrical and deliberate, his gaze lingering on each suspect, noting every flinch, every averted eye. Hastings, his nerves frayed from the poisoned cider incident, whispered, "Poirot, that shadow at the window last night? It's got me rattled. The killer's close, isn't he?" "Oui, mon ami," Poirot replied, his tone calm but resolute. "The killer, they watch, they scheme. But in their vigilance, they betray themselves. Let us review the clues, for they lead us to the heart of this crime." Japp cleared his throat, holding up the torn scrap of paper found in the cider house. "This note, 'Meet me at midnight.' It's a breakthrough. We've matched the handwriting to Elias Hawthorne's. He was expecting someone that night, and that someone likely killed him." Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Précisément, Inspector. The note, it suggests a rendezvous, perhaps a trap. But with whom? Madame Hawthorne, you argued with your husband that night, no? Did he mention a meeting?" Lydia's hands clenched her handkerchief, her voice low but steady. "No, he said nothing of a meeting. We quarreled about the manor's debts, as I told you. I left him in the cider house, alive, through the side door." Poirot's lips pursed. "Yet the side door, it was undisturbed, dust unbroken, lock untouched. Your story, madam, it falters." Lydia's face paled, but she held his gaze. "I swear I left him alive. I don't know how the door was locked." Poirot turned to Mabel, whose hands trembled as she stood by the tea tray. "Mademoiselle Croft, you saw Monsieur Hawthorne writing that night. Did you see this note?" Mabel shook her head, her voice a whisper. "I saw him scribbling, sir, but I didn't read it. He was always in that notebook, muttering about his recipe, his legacy." Blackwood, adjusting his spectacles, interjected, "This is all conjecture. I was miles away tending a patient. I had no meeting with Elias." Victor Lang, his broad shoulders hunching, growled, "Nor I. I was at the pub like I said. Master didn't tell me nothing about no midnight meeting." Thorne, his indignation flaring, added, Poirot said, his gaze shifting to Blackwood. "Doctor, you admitted Monsieur Hawthorne blackmailed you over falsified prescriptions. A powerful motive, no?" Blackwood's face flushed, his voice sharp. "I told you, he extorted me, but I didn't kill him. My alibi's solid. My housekeeper confirmed I was home past midnight." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The clues were mounting. The arsenic in the vat, matching the vial in Mabel's room, the dagger from the manor's collection, accessible to all. The glove marked RT, a red herring, the handkerchief in Blackwood's bag, another plant, the tampered cider, a warning to Poirot. And now a progressive revelation. The arsenic in Hawthorne's blood showed signs of chronic poisoning, not a single dose. The killer had been patient, methodical, until the dagger's impulsive strike. "Let us examine the motives," Poirot continued, pacing slowly. "Madame Hawthorne, you stood to inherit the estate, to escape a tyrant's rule. Monsieur Thorne, your rivalry with the victim was fierce. His recipe threatened your livelihood. Mademoiselle Croft, perhaps a spurned affection or fear of dismissal. Monsieur Lang, a grudge over threatened sacking. And Dr. Blackwood, blackmail that could ruin you. The suspects shifted uneasily, their eyes darting. Lydia broke the silence, her voice trembling. I couldn't bear Elias's cruelty any longer. Yes, I poisoned him, slowly, with arsenic from the shed. I wanted freedom, not his death. But the dagger, I didn't do that. Gasps filled the room. Japp's eyes widened, his hand reaching for his notebook. A confession, Mrs. Hawthorne. You poisoned him. Poirot's gaze was piercing. Madam, your candour. It is bold. But the dagger it complicates. Who wielded it, if not you? Before Lydia could respond, Victor Lang leapt to his feet, his face flushed. It was me. I stabbed him, after he collapsed from the poison. I wanted to frame Thorne, used the dagger with his crest. Master was already dying, I swear. The room erupted, Japp barking orders to his men. 2 confessions? This is a...
Suspects froze, Hastings diving for cover, while Japp drew his revolver. What the devil? Poirot remained calm, his eyes scanning the room. A blank, perhaps. A distraction. Japp's men rushed to the window, where the sound had come from, but found only fog and shadows. Nothing out there, a constable reported. Just the orchards. Poirot's gaze lingered on the suspects, each a portrait of fear or defiance. The shot. It is another warning. The killer. They fear the truth is near. But Hercule Poirot, he is nearer still. The suspects were dismissed, their confessions hanging heavy in the air. Lydia's admission of poisoning, Lang's claim of the dagger, both shifted the investigation. Yet Poirot's instinct screamed of a deeper truth. The notebook, the footprints, the scream in the orchard, all pointed to a single mind orchestrating the chaos. Hastings, shaken, turned to Poirot as they retired to the study. Good Lord, Poirot! 2 confessions in one day! Are Lydia and Lang working together? Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice soft but resolute. But the little grey cells, they doubt. The arsenic, it was subtle. The dagger, impulsive. The locked room, it was a puzzle designed to mislead. The true killer, they hide behind these confessions. Japp, joining them, rubbed his temples. This case is a nightmare. We've got poison, a stabbing, a locked room, and now a gunshot. What's next? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The truth, Inspector. The orchard, the notebook, the shadows, they will speak. Tomorrow, we confront the mastermind. As night fell, the manor grew quiet, the fog a shroud over the secrets of Applewood. A faint rustle outside, a branch, or something more, made Hastings start, but Poirot only smiled. The storm gathers, mon ami, and Hercule Poirot, he is ready. The fire dimmed, casting long shadows on the walls, where portraits of past Hawthorns gazed down.
Worker, his rough hands fidgeting restlessly. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the fireplace, his notebook trembling slightly, while Inspector Japp, his face a mask of grim determination, clutched a revolver, still shaken by the blank shot that had punctuated the previous gathering. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice a velvet blade, slicing through the silence. The threads of this mystery, the arsenic, the dagger, the locked room, the tampered cider, the note, the confessions, they converge here, now. The little grey cells, they have woven the tapestry, and the truth, it stands revealed. He twirled his moustache, a deliberate gesture,
his gaze locking onto each suspect, noting Lydia's shallow breaths, Thorne's clenched jaw, Mabel's tearful eyes, Blackwood's rigid posture, and Lang's uneasy shifting. Hastings, his voice low, leaned toward Poirot. "That shot, Poirot. It was a blank, but it rattled us all. The killer's desperate, aren't they?" "Oui, mon ami," Poirot replied, his tone calm but resolute. "The shot, it was a final flourish, a desperate attempt to distract. But Hercule Poirot, he is not swayed. Let us unravel the final threads." Jap, his revolver holstered but his hand hovering near it, spoke up. "We've got confessions, Poirot. Lydia admitting to the poison, Lang to the dagger, but you say there's a mastermind. Who is it?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "Patience, Inspector. The confessions, they are true, yet incomplete. Madame Hawthorne, you poisoned your husband, slowly, with arsenic, to escape his tyranny. Monsieur Lang, you stabbed him, believing him dead, to frame Monsieur Thorne. But these acts, they were orchestrated, puppets moved by a single hand." Lydia gasped, her handkerchief falling to the floor. "Orchestrated? I acted alone. I couldn't bear Elias's cruelty any longer." Lang nodded, his voice hoarse. "I stabbed him, but only 'cause he was already gone. I didn't know about no poison." "Patient! My alibi's solid." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Your alibi, it holds, for the night of the murder. But the arsenic, it was administered long before. And the dagger, it was you who placed it, you who orchestrated this crime." The room erupted, gasps and protests mingling with the crackle of the fire. Jap's hand tightened on his revolver. "Blackwood? You've got proof, Poirot." "Oui, Inspector," Poirot said, his voice steady. "The little grey cells, they deduce. The notebook, it revealed Monsieur Hawthorne's blackmail, your falsified prescriptions, Doctor, a secret that could ruin you. But there is more. Elias Hawthorne was not merely your patient. He was your half-brother, no? A secret heir, born of an affair with your mother, as his diary hints." Blackwood's face contorted, his voice a snarl. "Preposterous! You've no evidence." Poirot held up the notebook, open to a cryptic passage. "The doctor's secret, my blood, my heir. This, combined with the cologne on the dagger, it points to you. You poisoned Elias slowly, using your access as his physician. You knew his heart condition. You dosed his medicine with arsenic, masking it as treatment. But when he grew suspicious, you acted. You arranged the midnight meeting as the note suggests. You stabbed him, using the dagger to frame Monsieur Thorne, and locked the room to create the illusion of an impossible crime." Lydia's voice broke, her eyes wide. "But I poisoned him. I confessed." "Oui, madame," Poirot said, his tone gentle. "You poisoned him, believing it your own plan. But the arsenic, it came from the doctor's supply, planted in the shed for you to find. He manipulated you, knowing your desperation. And you, Monsieur Lang, you were his pawn, urged to strike the final blow, believing Elias already dead." Lang's fists clenched. "I thought he was gone. I just wanted to pin it on Thorne." Blackwood leapt to his feet, his voice a sneer. "Proof will follow. The residue on the dagger, the arsenic in your bag, the will, they are threads that bind you." The room fell silent, the suspects stunned. Lydia sobbed, her hands covering her face. "I didn't know. I thought it was my doing."
Lang slumped, his voice low. I was a fool, used like a tool. Thorne muttered. Knew I was innocent. That dagger was a dirty trick. Mabel, trembling, whispered, It's over then? Oui, Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. The shadows, they are dispelled. The truth, it shines. Jap, securing Blackwood, turned to Poirot. Blimey, Poirot, you've done it again. A half-brother, a secret heir. How'd you piece it together? The little grey cells, Inspector, Poirot replied, tapping his temple. They see what the eyes miss. The cologne. It was the final clue. A scent that lingered, like the truth. Hastings, his notebook forgotten, shook his head. Devilishly clever, Poirot. But that shot yesterday. It was Blackwood, trying to scare us off? Précisément, Poirot said. A blank, fired to disrupt, to delay. But the killer, they underestimated Hercule Poirot. As Blackwood was led away, the manor seemed to exhale, its oppressive air lightening. The fog outside lifted further, revealing the orchards in their autumnal glory, the apples gleaming like jewels. Lydia rose, her face pale but resolute. Monsieur Poirot, I must face my part in this. I poisoned him, even if manipulated. Poirot's gaze was kind. Madame, your confession, it will be considered. But the true crime, it lies with the doctor. The suspects dispersed, their roles in the tragedy clarified. Mabel returned to her duties, her tears drying. Thorne, vindicated, spoke of rebuilding his orchard. Lang, shaken but free, vowed to reform. The manor, though scarred, began to heal. Poirot stood by the window, his eyes on the orchards. The satisfaction of a puzzle solved, surveyed the room where the final threads of the mystery had been woven into truth. Captain Arthur Hastings, his notebook tucked away, stood beside him, a mix of awe and relief on his face. Inspector Japp, his revolver holstered, oversaw the final preparations to transport Dr. Silas Blackwood to the authorities, the mastermind behind the crime, now unmasked. Mon ami, Poirot said, his voice soft but resonant. The little grey cells, they have triumphed once more. The tapestry of deceit, woven with arsenic, a dagger, a locked room, and the web of red herrings, has been unraveled. The shadows of Applewood Manor, they flee before the light of truth. He adjusted his Homburg hat, a faint smile playing on his lips, as he gazed out at the orchards, where the apples gleamed like jewels in the sunlight. Hastings, still marveling at the denouement, shook his head. Brilliant, Poirot, absolutely brilliant. To think, Blackwood, the secret heir, manipulating Lydia and Lang like pawns. That cologne on the dagger, it was the clincher, wasn't it? Oui, Hastings, Poirot replied, his tone measured. The cologne, it was the signature of a man too proud to conceal his presence entirely. The arsenic, the will, the notebook, they confirmed what the little grey cells suspected. Dr. Blackwood, he played a dangerous game, but he underestimated Hercule Poirot. Japp, overseeing Blackwood's handcuffing, joined them, his face etched with grudging admiration. Blimey, Poirot, you've done it again. A half-brother, a secret heir, blackmail, and a staged, locked room. I'd never have pieced it together. But what about Lydia and Lang? They confessed, after all. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Madame Hawthorne, she poisoned her husband, yes, but under Blackwood's subtle influence. The arsenic, it was from his supply, placed in the shed for her to find. Monsieur Lang, he struck the fatal blow with the dagger, believing Elias already dead. But again,
Blackwood's whispers guided him, planting the idea to frame Monsieur Thorne. They were tools, Inspector.
Obsession and this tragedy. I'll start anew, somewhere far from these shadows.
Poirot bowed slightly. A wise choice, madame. The past, it must not chain you. Reginald Thorne, vindicated of suspicion, stood by the window, his florid face softened by relief.
Poirot, I owe you thanks. That glove, that dagger, they nearly ruined me. I'm rebuilding my orchard, you know. New blends, new buyers. Hawthorne's shadow won't haunt me anymore.
Bon, Poirot said, his smile faint. Monsieur Thorne, your rivalry, it was fierce, but your innocence, it shines. Prosper, and let the apples of Applewood be forgotten. Mabel Croft, the maid, hovered near the door, her youthful face no longer pinched with fear. Sir, I'm free, ain't I? No more suspicion? Poirot's expression softened. Mademoiselle Croft, you were a pawn, nothing more. The vial in your room, it was placed to mislead. Go forward, and fear no shadows. Victor Lang, his broad shoulders slumped, approached last. I was a fool, Monsieur Poirot, stabbing the master, thinking to frame Thorne. I let Blackwood use me. What happens to me now? Japp answered, his voice gruff but not unkind. You'll face charges, Lang, but your cooperation, your confession, it will help. Likely a lighter sentence. Poirot nodded. Monsieur Lang, you acted in haste, guided by a cunning hand. Learn from this, and let honesty guide you hence. As the suspects dispersed, the manor seemed to breathe easier, its oppressive air lifting with the fog. Blackwood, now in custody, was led to the police car, his spectacles glinting one last time as he cast a venomous glance at Poirot. You think you've won, Poirot, he sneered, but the truth's slippery. It'll haunt you yet. Poirot's smile was serene. The truth, Doctor, it is not slippery when held by the little grey cells. You wove a clever web, but it has unravelled.
Not the true key. Blackwood used a duplicate, locking the door from outside after staging the scene. The original he hid, believing it would baffle us. But the little grey cells, they see through such deceptions. As they prepared to depart, Poirot took a final walk through the orchards, his cane tapping softly on the path. The apples, gleaming in the sunlight, seemed to nod in approval. Hastings followed, his step lighter. What now, Poirot? Back to London? Oui, mon ami, Poirot said, pausing to pluck a fallen apple, its skin unblemished. The train to Taunton awaits. But first, a moment to savour the triumph of order over chaos. They boarded the police car, the manor receding behind them, its silhouette softened by the rising sun. The orchards stretched into the distance, their secrets laid bare. Lydia, free of her husband's shadow, would sell and move on. Thorne would rebuild, his rivalry forgotten. Mabel and Lang, though scarred, would find redemption in time. And Blackwood, the mastermind, would face justice for his intricate crime. As the car wound through the lanes, Poirot gazed out at the countryside, his mind already turning to new puzzles. The English orchard, Hastings. It is beautiful, no? But beneath its charm, it hides such darkness. Yet the light of truth, it always prevails. Hastings nodded, a smile breaking through. You're a marvel, Poirot. I'll never doubt those little grey cells again. Japp chuckled from the front seat. Till the next case, eh? You'll have us chasing shadows again soon enough. Poirot's laugh was soft, a rare sound. Perhaps, Inspector.
But for now, the shadows of Applewood are dispelled, and Hercule Poirot, he rests content. The car reached Taunton Station, the train's whistle a call to departure. As they boarded, the orchards faded into the distance, their golden apples a memory of a mystery solved. The cider house, once a tomb of secrets, stood open to the air, its ghosts laid to rest. The little grey cells had triumphed, and Applewood Manor, though forever changed, could begin to heal under the autumn sun.